The sword damage you're seeing right here is against a target with 5 pieces of Resilient, the 150 and 200 con perk, and light armor with a medium chest. Ahoy! I have been hunting for a while now to find the best damage sword in New World. By design, damage builds for swords in New World deal decent damage, but typically, especially for the one-shot combos, you kinda have to include a secondary weapon that deals more damage. But I wanted to go a route where I can just deal the highest amount possible with the sword itself without having to switch over. In order to achieve that, you kinda have to go to the limits of what New World allows you to do, because there are certain perk combinations that you can normally not get on weapons. For example, Enchanted and Rogue are both classified as damage con, and if you were to craft a sword, you would not get these perks together. However, you can still get weapons with those perk combinations by farming specific named items. Enchanted and Rogue, for example, exist together on Shadow's Edge. Likewise, round shields can normally not get Rogue, but Motherwell's Wishes coin has exactly this perk. But there are also limitations. For example, Rogue does no longer double stack between your sword and your shield. Certain perks still do, like for example any type of Bane, so if you're going for a dungeon and you want to go for double Ancient Bane between your sword and shield, that is excellent, but those are mostly outliers, and for the PvP related damage perks, this doesn't work most of the time. So I went on to test what I expected to be the best combination of named swords and shields, as well as additional shields and swords that work well with those named items in order to get the best combination of perks for the highest damage. The first weapon that I put into the race is the one I suffered for the most, Scorpio. This comes with 15 strength, Rogue, which gives you 19% extra backstab damage, Trenchant Crits, which makes fully charged heavy attacks deal 29% additional crit damage, and Empowering Leaping Strike. This increases your sword damage by 30% while an enemy is slowed by the Leaping Strike Cowardly Punishment upgrade, and is not an Empower, it's on top of that basically. To keep things consistent for testing, I upgraded all of the weapons to 600 gear score and slotted all of them with an Opal for the Gambit perk. Since Scorpio already has Rogue, I couldn't pair it with Motherwell's Wishes coin. Instead, I paired it with this round shield that I found with 15 strength, Fortifying Shield Rush, doesn't matter for testing, Vicious for 11% critical damage, and Keenly Jagged for additional bleed on crits. I also tested it with Enchanted and Keenly Empowered, we'll get to that later. By the way, if you don't know how to get Scorpio yet, I will link a video for that at the end. The second weapon in the race was Shadow's Edge. Also comes with 15 strength, also comes with Rogue, 90% backstab damage, and along with that it has Enchanted, which makes your light and heavy attacks deal 9.5% more damage. Additionally, it also has Keenly Empowered, which gives you 15% empower for 5 seconds on a critical hit. If you're interested in farming this weapon, it used to drop from the sneak and that's where I farmed it, but since then it has been moved and now drops from all the chests in Brimstone, so if you're doing acid chest runs, that's probably the most reliable way to get it, though it can take you quite a while. One downside of Shadow's Edge is that it doesn't come with Empowering Leaping Strike, so I put on an armor piece with Empowering Leaping Strike for all of the testing. This only gives you 17% additional damage though, compared to the 30% on Scorpio. For the first test, I used the same shield that I used for Scorpio, with Vicious and Keenly Jagged. But I also wanted to put a slightly different option into the race. I crafted a sword with full strength, Arboreal Attunement, which gives you 18% weapon damage when attacking with a 1 second cooldown, and also Thwarting Strikes. This gives you 11% additional damage while you have grit, and number-wise this and Rogue have the highest bonus damage that you can technically get on a heavy attack. This option could be enhanced further by rolling a third perk like Keenly Empowered or Keenly Jagged, but you'd probably spend a couple 100,000 gold to get that one. So instead we'll add those additional effects theoretically later. This crafted sword finally allows us to use Motherwell's Wishes coin with it, because it doesn't have Rogue on the sword, so we can benefit from the Rogue on the coin. Other than that, the coin has 15 con, refreshing move, which is very nice to have but not that effective for what we're trying to do with a burst combo, and Lightning Shear Ward. The coin drops from the Well Guardian in the Motherwell in Eden Grove, which you may remember from the main story quest. If you did this quest relatively recently, after this was changed to be a solo encounter, then you can actually just re-enter the well after you've defeated the Well Guardian. Since the area is accessible for newer players and the devs have actually added new loot to the Well Guardian, they seem to have no issue with people farming it. As for my gear, most of it is not relevant for the damage output that we had. As you can see, the average gear score here was 613, but again, the weapons were at 600 gear score anyways, and the only factor in damage that was on my gear other than the Empowered Leaping Strike leg piece was Legate's Ring. However, this is only relevant for light attacks, since all of the damage in the combo is either thrust or strike damage. All of my armor was light, so I could use a round shield and still stay in a light equip load. For the first round of tests, I had 300 strength, 50 dex, and the rest in con. For a realistic PvP scenario, I wouldn't recommend less than 150 con. I want to thank Superomega with his help with the testing, because he was my target dummy and also had some very constructive suggestions on how to improve certain things. He was running a light armor set with a medium chest piece, full resilient, and more than 200 con, I think even more than 300. This technically gives him more armor than quite a few players would have in PvP, but it's necessary because otherwise he would have just died mid-combo. This is the build I used, but there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to the right side perks especially. It's mainly so that I get all the relevant damaging perks. I skipped Final Blow because we're not really focused on the damage from the third hit in the chain. You can obviously add that. One thing that I will mention that's important is the inclusion of Shield Rush without any additional points. If you're not aware, currently you can true combo with Shield Rush into Shield Bash as long as you don't put any additional points past the first one into Shield Rush. This also still works while you have the Fortifying Shield Rush perk. Let's first look at Scorpio with the Vicious and Keenly Decked Shield. At the top you can see the stat distribution between Strength and Dex, and in the second row on the left you can see if the attack is a backstab or not. Most of the testing will be backstabs. I'm not going to read out all the numbers, but as an example you can see that a light attack with Scorpio deals 1453 damage if it's not a backstab, whereas a heavy attack backstab would deal 3225 damage. My first test was to do the most reliable true combo of Leaping Strike into Shield Rush into Shield Bash and then a backstab heavy attack. All of the numbers are backstabs because otherwise random crits could throw them off a lot. In this example, Leaping Strike would deal 2318 damage. Now we have the other numbers, you can see them here. The important one for us, obviously, especially the heavy attack after a dodge, because we have an Opal slotted, so if we have not full stamina, we actually get more out of it. So we get 3782 damage. The total combo, including the Keenly Jagged dot, deals 11,171 damage. That means in a lot of cases, if our target doesn't have Fortify, they're already dead. And there are ways to increase this damage, we'll get there. I also tried the same combo again, but with dodging beforehand, so I wouldn't have full stamina when hitting the target, which results in me getting extra damage from my Opal for all of the attacks. I still have to dodge again mid-combo, because I have Invigorating Bulwark, which actually gives me a lot of stamina back when using Shield Bash and Shield Rush. At the same time, I don't really want to leave that perk out because I think it's generally a very strong perk to have. There's an alternative option to deal with this, we'll get to that one later. The total damage in this case was 11,692, so roughly 500 extra damage. Now there was a problem with this combo, which we, by the way, solved later, but I realized at this point that I didn't actually keep the Empower from Empowering Leaping Strike long enough to still have it up when using the heavy attack. That's because Shield Rush and Shield Bash just take too long in terms of animation for that to happen. So what I also decided to try is the old school Shield Bash combo of Leaping Strike, Shield Bash and the heavy attack afterwards, which is not a true combo but can be confirmed against a target that is low on stamina. And this is when the heavy attack really started popping off and was dealing 4,678 damage. The total damage here was 10,336, so actually less, but that's because we lost the extra damage that we got from Shield Rush. Just for the fun of it, for this particular example, I also tested what would happen if we attacked the target from the front instead, with the first combo, Leaping Strike, Shield Rush, Shield Bash, and a heavy attack after a dodge. And I only had a crit on Shield Bash, so overall the numbers were reasonable, I would say. The overall damage wasn't much lower. Instead of 11,692 damage, the combo would now deal 10,485 damage. Still, definitely a massive threat for squishy characters. So now that we know Scorpio's damage, how does Shadow's Edge with the same shield compare? Due to Enchanted, the damage from light attacks is roughly 100 higher both as a front attack and a backstab, while the heavy attack damage is roughly 150 higher on a frontal attack, but falls behind significantly on a backstab, where Shadow's Edge only deals 2,831 damage compared to Scorpio's 3,225. This is because the Trenchant Crits perk really comes into play when we're talking about heavy attack backstabs. In the first combo, the Leaping Strike damage itself is actually unchanged because that's not affected by Empowering Leaping Strike or Enchanted. But the attacks afterwards are especially affected by the Keenly Empowered, so Shield Rush and Shield Bash deal a fair bit more damage. The heavy attack afterwards only does slightly more than 100 damage less compared to Scorpio, because Scorpio in this scenario is not benefiting from the Empowering Leaping Strike, and Keenly Empowered is active on Shadow's Edge. So overall we're actually ending up with 11,491 damage here, 320 damage more than with Scorpio. This gets flipped around when we're doing the quicker combo with Leaping Strike, Shield Bash and a heavy attack though. This is because now Empowering Leaping Strike is active on both weapons and it's just significantly stronger on Scorpio. A total combo now deals 10,073 damage instead of 10,336, mainly due to the difference in the heavy attack. We're looking at roughly a 500 damage difference. Overall definitely still very good numbers for Shadow's Edge though if you're looking at more than just doing this combo. But we can enhance the combo further on Scorpio, which we can't do on Shadow's Edge to the same degree. Before we talk about that, let's talk about the underdog, the Thwarting Attunement crafted sword with Rogue on the shield in the form of Motherwell's Wishes coin. Obviously having some extra elemental damage can be affected differently by what types of defenses the enemies have. For this scenario we're not going to go deep into that and just look at the basic version where we just combine both the physical and elemental damage. In this case, in terms of light attacking, the Thwarting Attunement sword is actually miles ahead of both Scorpio and Shadow's Edge with 1,819 damage. Even on a backstab it pulls ahead with 2,017 damage. Unfortunately got distracted and forgot to test the heavy attacks for this one, but that shouldn't be a big issue because the heavy attacks are usually used in the combo anyways, and we have those ones. The damage output from abilities and heavy attacks in the first combo is generally a little bit lower, but if you're wondering about the inconsistent bumps in damage compared to the first two weapons, it is because sometimes you'll get an attunement proc, but then that has a 1 second cooldown, and so you will have it on some of the abilities and not on others. The overall damage falls short of the named counterparts though with 10,051. In the shorter combo we see a similar picture with a total damage of 8,457. Realistically, as much as I like Motherwell's Wishes coin also because of the refreshing moves on it, I believe it is not the way to go for a high burst combo even if you can benefit from Rogue. I think that the total combined damage that you can get out of Vicious plus Keenly Jagged would be higher than what you get out of Rogue here. Realistically, if you get an absolute guard roll of a sword, this would probably be the strongest option in the game. If your third roll was Keenly Empowered, Keenly Jagged or Empowering Leaping Strike, and you could get a matching shield with either Keenly Empowered or Keenly Jagged, then this should keep up in damage with Scorpio and Shadow's Edge even in the combos, if not outperform them, and it would simultaneously be the strongest sword for trading as well because the light attack damage, the frontal damage would be significantly higher. Again, the problem with this is that it's incredibly expensive to roll compared to world drops that you can just farm. And I'm not rich enough for that, so I instead wanted to see if I could push Scorpio further. The next thing I tried was using an Enchanted Keenly Jagged shield, something you can't do with Shadow's Edge because it already has Enchanted. This actually resulted in slightly lower damage on the combo that I tested, 9,844. Well, certainly not terrible, but I would prefer Vicious because the sword crits very often and Vicious counts towards ability damage too. The next option that I tried was Scorpio with Vicious and Keenly Empowered instead of Keenly Jagged, which I think a lot of you generally prefer. Now, when we look at the damage of the first combo that includes Shield Rush, we can see that the overall damage is actually lower with 10,866, and the damage of our heavy attack is a fair bit higher with 4,123. Generally speaking, that means something that I know a lot of you will not like to hear, and that's that the combo likely favors Keenly Jagged in general. If you crit with Leaping Strike, then both Keenly Empowered and Keenly Jagged will kinda run throughout the duration of your combo and run out right at the end of it. Keenly Empowered right after the last hit and Keenly Jagged like a half second later. But after that, Keenly Empowered has 5 seconds downtime, while Keenly Jagged can proc again pretty much immediately with a 1 second cooldown, and also stays on the target if you swap weapons. The same thing is also true in the shorter combo, where you now deal 9,822 damage instead of 10,336, though more of the Keenly Jagged ticks happen after the combo in this case. But I know you guys like seeing big numbers and it's easier to test, so I did some more tests with Keenly Empowered. The next test was with Shadow's Edge with Vicious and Keenly Empowered, and that was very stupid because Shadow's Edge already has Keenly Empowered, so obviously this one has very low numbers. Still higher than Thwarting Attunement though. For the next test I ran 200 strength and 150 dex. This gives you more dodges and also gives you a slightly higher damage. You give up the grid on your light attacks, but I don't particularly care about that because I'm just looking to combo with a sword and then switch over to something else anyways. Because I want to see a very big number, we're using a Vicious Keenly Empowered shield. This time our total damage was almost comparable to the Keenly Jagged option with 10,144. With only 200 damage less and still some time left on the Empower in this short combo. Very, very interesting and also definitely something that you can scare someone with because the heavy attack crit from this combo is 5,281. But after all that, we had a little problem to solve. Because, like I told you earlier, when doing the second combo, we can actually get the extra damage from empowering Leaping Strike, but when doing the Shield Rush combo, it runs out too early. And Superomega, being a tank and being more familiar with those types of things, had a fantastic suggestion for that one. The crippling perk on rings extends the duration of slows by roughly 30%. This affects the slow from Leaping Strike and the extra damage from empowering Leaping Strike. And you don't even need to spend a lot of money to get a suitable ring for that, because Murkguard's ring, which drops from Tempest on any mutation level, will give you Dexterity, Crippling and Hearty anyways. We lose the slash damage, but again, for this combo that's not really important. The total damage from the normal combo with Shield Rush as a backstab is what you can see here. 12,501 damage. But that was without having emptied my stamina after the first part of the combo without dodging again. If I did that, I would actually get to 12,869 damage. At this point we are outscaling everything, including Shadow's Edge, significantly. And even if we do this combo from the front without emptying our stamina first, we get 10,836 damage with a single crit on Shield Rush. You can literally jump straight into someone's face, and unless they are avoiding your first attack, the Leaping Strike, you can deal more than 10,000 damage before they can react. Pretty crazy in my opinion. And that is still not the highest damage we can achieve. We can increase both the gear score of the sword and shield to 625 to amplify those effects and give us more base damage, though to be fair we'd also have to increase the armor of the target slightly because that wasn't quite at 625. And we also can increase the damage further in other ways. We could, for example, if you want to splurge, slot a ring with thrust damage as well as crippling to get a very easy damage increase. We could also slot a Malachite instead of the Opal to make the follow-up damage more reliable. Because of the slow from Leaping Strike, everything afterwards will deal increased damage, and that will happen every single time without you having to roll in between, so I would personally prefer that. Now you may realize that Malachite gives you slightly less extra damage than Opal, but in either case I would highly recommend putting them into a Rune Glass case anyways. And once you have them in a dot Rune Glass, the damage difference is honestly negligible. It's a 2% lower increase, but way more of your gem damage will come from the dot part anyways. Without having tested this further, I would say that you can easily push past 13.5 if not even 14,000 damage on Scorpio if all the conditions are met. At some point minor increases get fairly expensive though, especially if you're considering slotting things like punishing gems. For now I've pushed these tests as far as I'm willing to go, and I can conclude that the highest burst that we can currently reliably achieve is definitely on Scorpio, and it's higher than on Shadow's Edge, but on the other hand Shadow's Edge is not far behind and is often a better all-rounder as well. In both cases, having a ring with crippling will increase your damage massively, and a Thwarting Attunement sword is definitely not bad either. It is not quite keeping up with them in the strongest burst combos, but it's far from terrible. If you're rich or lucky enough to roll a strong Thwarting Attunement 3-perker sword, then you may be able to keep up much better and will win any trade that doesn't rely on the combo. But trading is something I would swap to my second weapon for, which is of course a greatsword. If you want to learn more about the greatsword, I have an advanced guide linked right here, and if you want to learn more about how to farm Scorpio, I have a link for that here as well, so feel free to check those out. In the next days, we'll talk about more sword shield related stuff. We'll talk about the shield issues that we currently have in New World and what can be done about them as well. So if you're interested in that, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you get notified when that comes out. Thanks for watching. Duke Sloth, out.